Hello, my name is Nicholas Green, and today we'll be talking to you about an arachnologist. Now, the most famous question that comes to mind is, what is an arachnologist? Well, arachnologist is a scientist that studies arachnids, which are bedbugs, ticks, but most famously known for their spiders, tarantulas, and scorpions. Now, a lot of people ask, what did it take for me to become an arachnologist? Well, it took a lot of time and a lot of work. It takes about 8 years because you need your PhD and bachelor's. And another question we get is, what do we do on our day-to-day routine? Well, that's very interesting as well because it depends on what day it is and what we're trying to do. But usually, it goes by as if I go in the mornings, I check on the species, make sure everything's okay. I'll check their weekly charts. Usually, they'll have a chart that displays their behavior throughout the week, their eating habits, what they've been eating, how frequently have they been eating, whether they're in molt, pre-molt, or shedding, which usually means they won't eat a lot before that. So just make sure that that's what's going on and that there's not an injury or anything else that they could be having. And usually I'll check that to make sure I know what I need to do next and what the next step is. And then if we're planning on actually mating one of the species, then we'll check in the females and the males. But we tend to try to check on the males a little bit more simply because with arachnids, especially spiders, the females are a lot more aggressive and the females are a lot larger. And the males are more docile and small. So in order to compare that for a human, say if there was a male who weighed about, let's say 170 pounds. Well, to compare that to a spider and a female, that would mean the female would be 1,700 pounds because they're like 10 times bigger than their males. So we always have to make sure that the male is okay, the male is growing, the male is full grown, and the male is able to mate properly. And we also try to make sure that during the process that the male doesn't get hurt significantly or die, because if the female feels threatened, doesn't want to mate, or is just hungry, they will kill and eat the male. And then after that, we'll do venom and silk extractions because depending on what species it is, there could be a pandemic or an epidemic where there have been a lot of spider bites of a specific species and they might need an anti-venom. We'll do venom extractions of that spider or of that scorpion, and then we'll send those in to a lab, and then they'll conduct an anti-venom for it and a cure. For silks, they'll use those to help make stuff for protection, bulletproof vests, because spider silk is famously known to be quite strong. It's lighter than Teflon, and but it's stronger than steel. And if you was to take a piece of silk, a spider silk, and it was to be about a width of a pencil, it could be strong enough to take down a jumbo jet or a cargo ship with ease. So it's really been in the process of being used for bulletproof vests and protection like that. And then after that, we'll feed them. We'll observe their feeding habits, if they're being very weak, docile, if they're being very shy, or if they're being overly aggressive, if they're being very offensive and very defensive because maybe they're injured, maybe they're going through something with their said body parts, maybe they've broken a leg, or they're shedding and they don't want, or molting and they don't want to eat right away because they don't eat before they molt. And that's pretty much how a day goes. You need a lot of skills for this because there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong if you don't have the right credentials for it. So for instance, you have to be very, very detailed in your work. If you're describing a certain species, you have to be very detailed about what you're seeing, how they're acting, how they're behaving, and you have to be very detailed on what you're looking at. You have to make sure that you're looking at everything with precision, because if you're not, then one small characteristic that's different from another spider can determine whether or not you have an extremely docile, mild spider that has a bite that's as bad as a bee sting, or you could have an extremely aggressive spider or tarantula or scorpion that has a sting or a bite that's so bad that it could incapacitate you within 30 minutes, or it could leave a gash in your arm. So those are things you really have to look out for. A lot of times what's most commonly mistaken is if a brown recluse bite is a black widow's bite. And for that, physicians usually look at it wrong, and they'll give the brown recluse bite, or the venom, the anti-venom, which will make the situation a lot worse, because the venom of a brown recluse and a black widow is totally different, and both of them work entirely different ways. So the same way, you have to be very detailed in what you're looking at and very precise. You also have to be very calm and cannot make certain movements, because spiders can't see too well, but they can hear they have excellent hearing, so they can feel vibrations all around them. And it might not be shown in the spider or the tarantula or the scorpion, but if you make the wrong move, if you're moving too much, or if they're too sudden movements, they can move in a dart, and whether they move towards you or away from you totally depends on the species and how they're feeling at that time. But you could get hurt. The species, the animal could get hurt, and it's something that you really don't want. You have to be very precise on where you're putting them, where you're placing them, and the characteristics, because there are spiders, there are scorpions that have been known to dart and to run simply because they're trying to get out of a situation. They feel nervous, so they'll leave. So you have to make sure you're keeping an eye on them, and that all the cages and all the enclosures are closed tightly, properly, and they're locked. And then after that, make sure that their enclosures are kept up to date. There's not extra cobwebs in there or extra bugs or insects that they've been feeding on. There's no extra body parts or carcasses laying around. And that's usually how a typical day goes with what kind of skills you're going to need for the job. Now, how much I make for this job, well, that depends on who I work for and what kind of job I'm doing. Because if I'm working on something very simple, I might not get paid as much. But an arachnologist can make $100,000 a year or more doing this job. And the same way it varies with that is also how it varies with, do I work with people or alone? Depending on what kind of job I'm doing, depends on whether or not I need to be solitary or if I am not. For instance, say if I'm going for the Sydney funnel web spider or the Brazilian wandering spider. Well, if I was to go for the Sydney funnel web, of course, I'd have to have a team with me. I'd have to have multiple arachnologists and scientists with me to make sure that, we're not going to mess anything up. We're not going to take a spider that shouldn't be taken out of its habitat, or we're not hurting the ecosystem or anything like that when we remove this one species. And also that make sure that we get multiple opinions on, certain topics to make sure we're getting a male if we only need a male, or a female if we only need a female. And so if we were to do an extraction with that, we'd have to make sure everything's set, everything's placed, that we have the right team members for that. So let's say we take that spider, we end up capturing one, and we take it back to the lab, or take it back to where we're going to house it. Then that's where it can kind of get more solitary, because then I'll be studying it. I'll be studying its behaviors, figure out what age it is, what it's eating, has it been injured in its life, things like that. And research like that can take well over a couple weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, depending on how extensive the research is. It could take a month. So it just all depends on what you're doing, especially with a complex spider as the Sydney funnel web, which is one of the oldest spiders in the world. It's kind of known to be like the angry grandpa of it all, because, well, they've been known to be dated back since prehistoric times, which means their pre-developed lungs, they can't breathe properly, or they can't breathe as quickly as they need to. So they get old, kind of tired and sluggish, but their venom is extremely potent and it's extremely deadly. But on the bright side, we can use their venom to do research to help fight breast cancer, which is an amazing thing. Other things than that, well, other than that, there's really nothing else we can talk about for now. I mean, other than the fact that the industry of arachnologists and arachnology is pretty vast. There are over thousands of different species and subspecies. For instance, jumping spiders are entirely separate thing than regular spiders. Instead of, regular spiders and tarantulas having poor eyesight, jumping spiders have incredible eyesight. They can see far away. They can see ultraviolet colors and all sorts of things like that. So to put that in human perspective again, if I was to have the eyes of a jumping spider, I could count how many petals are on a rose or how many petals are on lavender from across a football field. I could be on the other side of a football field and see that up close as if it was like right in front of my face. And so when being in this industry, especially with scorpions too, there are so many different kinds that can have the slightest difference, but it can make like a huge change in whatever we're looking at or researching. And it's a very interesting industry and topic, and definitely something that interests me a lot. Thank you for your time.